Brazilian Shirt Name Podcast with Dotun Adebayo and Tim Vickery.
Yeah, it's time to have some fun. It's the Brazilian Shirt Name Podcast. The legend Dino as ever. Tim Vickery is over there in Rio. He's having fun anyway because he's in Brazil. And our guest, Johnny Duerdan, Asian football expert, is with us. He's normally in Seoul, Tim. That's why we call him the Northern Seoul. But look at the back cloth on that. I'm not sure. Because, South Koreans are really organized. You know what I mean? They're very, very, very organized. Whereas behind Johnny, I can see there's a chaotic mess of books and this and that and bric and brac. You're definitely in the UK, aren't you? You're definitely.
It's daytime. It's midnight in Seoul, and it's not midnight here. So I'm in England. Yes, and yes, but actually, Dustin, I can see behind you is slightly. In Korea, there's a saying called "Oshitbo Bekbo," and the man, I think, it translates as something like the man who runs 50 yards from the battle shouldn't criticize the man who runs 100 yards from the battle.
Well, it wasn't a criticism. It was just pointing out that the UK has a particular look, of which, absolutely right, I embrace. Why not?
Yes.
And South Korea, I expect to see you in a very, very tidy apartment.
Would be, yes. It would have been, yes.
Where there's absolutely nothing there. That's what you call Southeast Asian minimalism, I suppose. Anyway, great to have you on the program, particularly because we're looking forward to a World Cup, and Asia is a central part of that. Are they watching over there where you are, Tim Vickery, the Asian onslaught? After all, Japan recently beat Brazil, didn't they?
Yes, they're watching Japan. And Japan, I think, are one of the most fascinating teams in the world. And Japan, and they showed this in the last World Cup, there are 5 and 10 minute bursts of games where they can be the best side in the world. They're extraordinary. I mean, watching Japan in the last World Cup, it destroyed a lot of my notions about the need to control the game or so on, because, the games against Spain and Germany, Japan will soak it up, and then suddenly it's like without even making substitutions, they just flick a switch. And for 10 minutes, they're all over the opponents and they're scoring lots of goals. And that's what they did. Admittedly, it was a reserve Brazil defence that they did it against. But they're 2-0 down at half-time and flick the switch and win 3-2. So Japan would seem to me to be the standout. So maybe a provocative question to go with that as well, Johnny. Japan are the standout. Is there anything there from the rest? And could we argue that Japan aside, maybe Asia has been overrepresented this time around?
Well, I think Japan are clearly the best team in Asia by some distance. I mean, I was expecting an invitation when Japan came back to beat Brazil 3-2, but it must have got lost in their inbox somewhere. But I think one of Japan's problems is that they qualify so easily, especially this time to Asia. I mean, they weren't tested at all, and that is an issue really. By the time when you play 90% of your competitive games against Asian teams, and you're not really pushed, and I mean, they really, really strolled to the World Cup without breaking a sweat. They're the first team to qualify, of course, for 2026. So, and that's why, as any opportunity that they can have, they will try and arrange friendlies against teams from elsewhere. And recently, the AFC, Asian Football Confederation, made an announcement that they're going to try to introduce an Asian Nations League along the lines of, the European one, which would be bad news. No one in Japan wants that because they don't want to play against more Asian teams. But that is an issue that they find the path to the World Cup so easy, but then when the World Cup starts, of course, it's quite a jump in levels and tension and competitiveness. But I think that we mentioned the game against Brazil. That was a big game for Japan. They never beat Brazil before, and we're not getting all kind of pseudo-intellectual. I think it showed Japan, it showed themselves, we beat Spain and Germany at the last World Cup, and now we beat Brazil. Of course, it was at home in a friendly, but there's no reason why we can't go to the World Cup and have a good World Cup. I think, and for the first time, I think that is a target to, not just get out of the group, but to actually do something.
Yeah, these small bursts of domination that Tim talks about. Oh, before that, let's do the housekeeping first of all. You're watching the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast, coming to you every Wednesday and Thursday from 4 p.m. UK time, whatever it be, British Summer Time or Greenwich Mean Time. And we would invite you to join us in the conversation. You've got a chat box there that you can get in contact. And if you want to come on and be visualized, as it were, then feel free as well. And do remember to subscribe, and please do remember to join our WhatsApp group as well. But when Tim describes, I think, quite eloquently, those little bursts of periods in a match that Japan basically just dominates, you can't believe it. You know, you're thinking, what am I watching here? You expect them to go on and win, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I wonder, though, whether it's a stereotype as well as anything, that's what we see about Japan, but there's much more to it than that. For example, the Japanese players, I'm thinking one or two in the Premier League that we see, and many of the Japanese team, as you know, are playing overseas, if not in the Premier League, in Germany and other major leagues. But I wonder, those players that we see are very technical players, very, very technical players. You know, Mitoma at Brighton, for example, is a brilliant example. He's not let's burst around for 10 minutes, with an intensity and then let's hope for the best. He certainly understands the game. Are we underplaying the skills of Japan?
Well, I think perhaps because, unlike, say, South Korea, which has maybe bigger names like Son, Japan doesn't have that. But as you mentioned, they've got so many players in Europe now, and they're going younger and younger all over the continent. The coach has and can and sometimes has in the past, named squads full of just European-based players. And even last month, the way Japan works is, there's the under-23 Asian Championships, and Japan sent a team basically for the 19 and 20-year-olds to get prepared for the 2028 Olympics. Nobody else does that, and they still won. And it shows, they have been, the best in Asia for a while, but now, the distance is getting bigger and bigger. And the head coach is still the same from the last World Cup since 2018, in fact. There's no kind of huge glamorous stars, but it's a team full of, say, technically excellent players who have been together for a long time. Perhaps what they lack maybe is kind of, world-class goal scorers, but in terms of, all-round technical ability, they have what it takes. And I think for now, in the past, as I mentioned, in any Asian team the target was get out of the group, around the 16 will be good, but in Japan wants to get to the last 8 at least. And now there's talk of them actually trying to win the World Cup, maybe not this time, but sometime pretty soon. And I think the conversation's changed in Japan now in recent years to not just be part of the World Cup, but it's actually become a genuine powerhouse. And I think they're a dark horse next in the summer. And the opening game against the Netherlands is a perfect one. I think Japan believe they can win that and believe they will win. And that will send a really good message out to themselves and the rest of the competition that they can do really well.
Yeah, what Japan needs at the moment is Pele, isn't he? They need to bring back Pele so that he can predict that Japan will win the World Cup by the year 2050 or whatever it might be. And of course, that will bear fruit. Obviously, you look at Africa, for example, that Pele predicted. For those who don't know that reference, no. But sorry, go ahead.
Japan had the vision to win the World Cup by it's like 20 years ago, whatever it was, the 100-year vision, and it's all mapped out. And I think, unlike any other Asian country, Japan has set out a vision, but actually patiently executes it, and is not looking for shortcuts and bringing big name foreign coaches or do this. Just they know it takes time and effort and consistency. Yeah, it's bearing fruits, and don't want to go overboard because who knows what will happen. But I think they're going to America as or North America, I should say, as a team that can really do something and really show that now they're one of the big boys, and I think it's definitely possible. One or two injuries that the former Liverpool player, I think Takuki Mino, he's injured. He's going to miss it, I think, and that's a shame. But everyone's going to have injuries, especially at the end of a long European season. But it's looking pretty good.
Yeah, unless you want to come in, Tim, I've got a couple of questions still. I wonder, Johnny, if you said they expect to get in the top 8, the final 8.
Well, that's the target. I think for the first time, I mean, that would be seen as a good World Cup, not just getting out of the group, but to actually go quite far in
to
the
get to the
competition.
quarterfinals.
Yes.
Quarterfinals, essentially. Yeah. What's the furthest they've ever been in a World Cup?
Round of 16. In 2010, they should have been there before. I mean, in 2010, they lost in that stage to Paraguay. I think in the penalty shootout in South Africa. It was a dreadful game, I think, 0-0. And then the last World Cup against Croatia, again, they should have won that game, but lost on penalties. So even then, they should have gone to the quarterfinals. So they've knocked on the door a few times, but I think this is the time.
Yeah. Well, we'll wait and see. They're not the big boys and maybe we'll come back to Japan if we've got time in this conversation. I don't want to miss out the rest of the vast area of geography that you cover as an Asian football expert, Johnny. You would assume they're the big boys in Asia, but then you forget that Australia are technically in Asia, aren't they? They're the Socceroos.
Well, yes, they're part of the Asian Football Confederation, have been since 2006. So yes, and they've been ever present at the World Cup since.
So Australia are more likely to be World Cup contenders, aren't they, than Japan? Or am I?
No, I don't think so. I mean,
okay.
I think that would have been the case, a while ago. But when Australia first came into Asia, they were full of big name players from the Premier League and Serie A and Bundesliga. But now it's slightly different. I mean, they're in the same qualification group, and Japan went there. I think the last away game, but by that time Japan already qualified. They played not really even a second team, a very, very young side, but still should have won, but lost in the last minute. So yeah, so Japan are clearly a better team than Australia, but Australia do have that mentality, of even being sometimes more than some of their parts. And Australia, again too, in the past few World Cups, they've always had a very difficult group, but this time I think they fancy their chances a bit more because it's the US, Paraguay, and a European playoff winner, I think it is. But they're quite an organised team with a former Crystal Palace player, Tony Popovic, as head coach, and he's won the Asian Champions League with Western Sydney Wanderers in 2014, and he came in during qualification when he galvanised the side. Hard-working, organised, full of players, decent players, and players like the Championship. There's no big stars anymore, but again, I think always hard to beat and always fancy their chances. In the last World Cup, they got to the second round and gave Argentina a good game, and so they really, I think they do a little bit also when they play the US and Paraguay. Probably they'll be slight underdogs, maybe. I think that suits them to not being the favourites, and they do have the mentality, which is a bit of a stereotype, but in Asia it does stand out a bit when even when they don't play so well, they can get a result.
Yeah,
I saw them. I saw them a couple of times recently. Australia in the November friendlies, they come over and played a couple of teams over here. I just couldn't believe how bad they were. They
really?
Just astonishingly off the scale. Dreadful. They lost to Venezuela. Yeah, well, maybe. And it flummoxed me a little bit because there didn't seem to be much talent there. And I wondered what's happened to those who, as kids, were watching 2006 and so on. And so why haven't they kicked on further? I know the game against Venezuela, they're almost as bad as it was possible to be. Just dreadful, dreadful team. Why haven't they made more progress?
Well, it's interesting that in terms of sending players to the big European leagues, now Australian players go to championship teams. My team, Blackburn Rovers, who I have to mention every time. They've got a good, solid.
It's in the contract, mate.
Yeah, it's in the contract. But yeah, since the turn of the century, you haven't Mark Viduka, Harry Kewell, Tim Cahill, even going down like Vince Grella, Mike Bresciano, of course, Mike Sforza, but now there's team like the big players now. Probably Jackson Irving plays in Germany. Harry Suter, you've Leicester. He's been injured for quite a long time. Matt Ryan is, I think, his goalkeeper, is still in Spain, but they're not going to the big European league straight away. You find a lot more Australians now playing in different Asian leagues in East Asia and in the Middle East. But no, they don't produce the same kind of big stars. But again, I think it'd be interesting to see. The game against when they play the friendlies. Hopefully, they always have to travel quite a long way. But I'm sure by the time they get to the World Cup, they'll be a bit harder to play against. Maybe not the most exciting team to watch, but well organised and quite physical as well.
Yeah, if we can go back to Japan for 1 second, when you mentioned the opening match against the Netherlands, it's on the 14th of June at 9:00. They're in Group F. Can you imagine an upset?
Well, I don't think it'd be much of an upset, really.
Really?
Yeah, I think Japan beat Germany and Spain in the group stage of the last World Cup. I think I wouldn't be surprised.
It's not an upset anymore, is it? I think that the last World Cup has changed that one, or should have done.
Yeah, and even in 2018, they went out to Belgium, but they probably should have won that game in the second round. It was a fantastic game. So I think at times it's been belief. Can we really do it? I think now they know they can. So it doesn't mean they're favourites to beat the Netherlands, but there's certainly, compared to, say, 10 or 14 years ago, there wouldn't be any fear or anxiousness about playing a major European power. And I think Netherlands will also feel we've got a very tough game, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Japan won that game, really. And yes, and I say go quite far. If things go their way, who knows?
Having said that, I think it's
such. Sorry, Don. It's such an interesting game, that one, because if you look at the group stage, the big challenge that there is for Asia is games against Europe. It's Asia against Europe again and again and again. And in all, there are 10. And if Iraq make it through from their little playoff, and I would imagine that they're probably the favourites to do so, it will be 12. 12 tie-ups between Asian football and European football. Do you think, is this the time when, Japan aside, the Asians have a best chance of overcoming that challenge?
Well, you'd hope so. Similar to Japan, Asian teams don't get that much of a chance to play against European sides at all. South Korea apart, there's a few differences. But when you look at qualification from Asia, it wasn't, the quality Japan side wasn't fantastic. If these games are being played in Europe, I think you'd be a bit concerned. But in North America, who knows? And certainly some of the teams will have decent expat populations cheering them on in certain cities. But yes, if you take Japan out of the equation, I'm sure we'll mention South Korea and Iran are the other kind of two big powers, and they're in kind of uncertain places at the moment. And there are a certain amount of gloom around the national team for different reasons. And then when you get past those, looking at Qatar, Saudi Arabia, who you're not so confident of, and then Uzbekistan have never been here before. So it's going to be tricky, I think. Japan are the best bet by far. But 32 teams go through, so it's very difficult to say no one has a chance, because you win one game, that might be enough.
Well, I think it's fair to say that if Japan do beat the Netherlands in that opening match, the Netherlands will be very upset. Anyway, that aside, South Korea. Yeah, let's talk about South Korea then, the other big gun in the Asian continent. Of course, everybody will remember Son Heung-min for obvious reasons, because he played for Tottenham so well, but he has been...
Good time to leave. He left at the right time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Tim's agreeing with you, so he would know. But also, remember, he was always the leader of the South Korean team. Everybody looked to him, didn't they? He even managed to get off his military service in order to represent the national team, etc. Which is a kind of military service, let's face it. You're playing football in a major international tournament for your country. That's military service efficiently, or at least non-military, civilian service, let's say. But this will be his last World Cup. He will be playing, no doubt. This will be his last World Cup. Where do they go from him?
Well, it might not be. I mean, probably is. You're right, but I would imagine it is the last World Cup. Well, he's moved to play. He plays in LA, so some people say one reason why he did go to LA was because of the World Cup. And there's a very large South Korean contingent population there. I think biggest outside Korea. Unfortunately, though, unless they actually get out of the group, they won't play in the US. All the games are in Mexico, which is was slightly disappointing, I think, for lots and lots of people. And Korea have issues in that they have a team of 3 or 4 big stars. Like Son, of course, is the best known. Then you have Lee Kang-in, who plays for PSG. Maybe the most exciting Asian player in terms of creativity and just watching him play. He's been linked to Tottenham. He was linked to Tottenham in January.
Why'd you laugh? What's so funny about that?
It's just just a narrow escape, I guess. But he's a lovely player. He's played to Arsenal before. I mean, he doesn't play the game PSG, but he plays a fair bit. I think he scored against Tottenham in the Super Cup final, I think, and whenever that was. And he's kind of the midfield, kind of creative hub. Now you got Kim Min-jae, a centre back who plays at Bayern Munich. So you got 3 teams, 3 players at who were at big European teams, and the big stars and 3 of the biggest names in Asia. But there is a feeling that the way the team plays is a bit reliant on those 3 doing something special rather than maybe like the Japanese way, which is to have a system and build play, or otherwise, apart from give it to Lee or give it to Son, and hopefully they'll do something. Korea again qualified quite easily, but the group, they came through was Oman, Palestine, Iraq, Jordan, and Kuwait. Something you'd expect them to go through. They weren't convincing. The national team coach is Hong Myung-bo, who was a 2002 World Cup captain, a legend. He played at 4 World Cups. He's also the coach at the 2014 World Cup in Brazil when it went quite badly, and he's not impressed. Fans are not very happy with him. So there's a general feeling that the team's not in a great place. Having said that, I think in September they went to the US and they beat the US 2-0 and drew with Mexico 2-2 in the US as well. But apart from that, results and performances haven't been great. But the group is quite open, I think, playing Mexico in the first game and then the South Africa and the European team. So, you'd hope they go through, but they should be able to. But other teams in that group will feel the same about South Korea because they're not a team to be scared of. I think compared to Japan, they're a team that can do it in the big moments, but are not the most fluid.
Yeah, there's
so many. They start their campaign against the European opposition, don't they? Like so many of the Asian teams.
Yeah,
and that opening clash is going to define the mood. You win that game and you practically qualify, don't you?
Yeah.
You lose that game, and so those opening first round Asia versus Europe clashes, I think are going to be really interesting.
It's very hard because it's only every 4 years to see this happen, so it's very difficult to know because you never see them play these games. So there's Korea's have a lot of talents. I mean, lots of technically minded players, but with the change in the coach, Jurgen Klinsmann was a disaster in charge of Korea, and that set the team back, and they're still recovering from that really. Whereas look at Japan again, they're the same man in charge for 8 years, and that consistency and continuity makes a difference. And I think Korea looks at Japan, and for a long time, I mean, the two biggest rivals in Asian football, really, and for a long, long time, Korea was better than Japan and took great pride in that. And then for quite a while, they were pretty much equal footing, but in the past kind of 5, 6, 7, 8 years, Japan's pulled away, and that's quite painful for the Koreans, really. And only now they'll say openly, we need to get back to following Japan and do what they do.
I was saying Tim's point about their opening match, how vital it is, was bringing me nicely to talk about Saudi Arabia, because of course in the last World Cup they did their opening match against Argentina and took everybody by surprise, and suddenly we started wondering whether Saudi Arabia was going to win the World Cup for a minute. Should they meet them, Argentina again?
Can they beat? No, I don't think so. It's not the same Saudi Arabia that got that result. The coach has come back. Everyone already came back after Mancini's time. it hasn't been the same. Many of the players are still there. I mean, the best player is still Salam Al-Dawsari, who scored the winning goal against Argentina, but now he's 33, 34. He still plays really well for Al Hilal, but for a while in Saudi Arabia he hasn't impressed. One problem is, if you look at qualification, in the main round of the third round when they played Japan, Australia, they played 10 games. They scored 7 goals in 10 games, and none of those goals came from recognised strikers. I think one problem is, with the spending in the Saudi Pro League, teams tend to buy quite talented foreign strikers, and local lads, have trouble getting minutes on the pitch, and that's an issue. And then they didn't qualify directly through the third round, which meant they went to playoff round, and then they got all sorts of advantages. They played Iraq and Indonesia. Both games were in Saudi Arabia. They had 6 days rest between the 2 games. Other 2 teams had three days rest, and they just scraped through on goals scored. So they play Uruguay first. I mean, if they got a draw, that would be a fantastic result, but you just can't. This is not as good a team as it was 4 years ago. They're lacking. The best players are older, and there's a couple of decent young players coming through in the midfield, but I think the way they played and the performances since that Argentina game really, haven't been very impressive.
Having said that, Tim, Uruguay aren't very
on the Argentina game was based on not at all. I mean, it's Bielsa's Uruguay at the moment, but the next friendly is against England. If they get another shellacking there, it's even possible that there might be a change of coach between the end of March and the World Cup. I mean, I thought Saudi Arabia against Argentina in the World Cup last time around, I think it's one of the great all-time World Cup performances. I really do. I thought it was fantastic because it was a victory for courage. What everyone imagined was that Saudi Arabia would sit deep and Argentina would have the ball, and Saudi Arabia would just try and frustrate them. And they didn't do that at all. They played this, and it could have gone massively wrong. Mm-hmm. This suicidally high line. So they pressed Argentina like mad, and they stopped Argentina having the time and space on the ball that Argentina thought they were going to have. They changed the game into a type of game that Argentina weren't expecting, and won because of it. It was a victory for bravery more than anything else. And as we saw in the subsequent games, they weren't that good. But it's always like boxing, isn't it? The style makes the fights. And Saudi brilliantly, really courageously chose a style that no one expected and surprised Argentina. Are they capable of something similar? Can they pull some kind of surprise out against? Because it's a difficult group. To start off against Uruguay, and then you got Spain. Yeah. Before the Cabo Verde game, it could be all over by then. Have they got it in them to pull some kind of surprise out of the hat?
Not on the evidence since that Argentina game, really. There's nothing since then has been that they could. That kind of, for Asian teams, that Uruguay is seen as a very tricky, very difficult side to play, and the kind of team that Saudi Arabia never gets to play against, really. And you just can't imagine that. But we would have said the same 4 years ago against Argentina. But I think lightning doesn't really strike twice, I think. And this team isn't as good as the team it was, 3.5 years ago. And expectations aren't as high. So maybe that helps. But I think for the Saudis now, it's all about preparing for 2034 when they'll host the World Cup and building the team, improving the team. And just, if this hadn't been an expanded World Cup, they would have got nowhere near the World Cup, really. If Asia had 4 or 5 teams like it usually does, Saudi Arabia wouldn't be here. So in some ways it's a bonus, so who knows?
Well, how does that affect the way that Uruguay will face the World Cup, Tim? Because, you've made the point that, Bielsa may not even be the coach come the World Cup. But if, as Johnny's saying, look, they're bound to get through that first qualifying stage, the group stage. They're bound to get through. No, you don't reckon?
They have been. We'll get into this on another date, but the start under Bielsa was really good back in 23. It was really good. And then the longer they spent with him, the more they disliked him. And recently they've been awful. And Bielsa will tell you this. He calls 2-hour press conferences when he talks about how terrible they are and how badly he's doing his job. You know, they're a side. It's Bielsa ball, so you know what they're going to do, and they're set up to create, and they're not creating anything. So I mean, they really have been poor. There's a lot riding on these friendlies next month, where the England game, I think they're trying to fix up an African opponent for the second game. I don't think it's firmly fixed up yet. There's a lot riding on it because on the last game they got done 5-1 by the States, and the States were nowhere near full strength. And the scoreline 5-1 was a fair reflection on the play. And they were just awful. Couldn't attack, couldn't defend, couldn't do anything. And it felt like, well, you know, now they've got a higher risk game, which is away to England at Wembley. And if things go badly there, then Bielsa could fall. In which case, almost certainly they'll bring in a local, and it'll be back to circle the wagons and play much more defensively. So at the moment, Uruguay, I think, is a complete unknown, and the England game will do a lot to define which way they go.
I think we may as well bring some politics into this, Johnny. I know from the Asian footballing perspective, they might think they're a million miles away from what's going on in the rest of the world. But we're all going to the World Cup in a place called the United States of America, or not, as the case may be, if Iran qualify. We may not all be going to a place called the United States of America. What's the feeling like, and how will Iran respond? And indeed, FIFA, I imagine, will force the United States to invite them in or not.
Well, I mean, I don't really know what the feeling's like in Iran because nobody knows at the moment because the country's cut off. I did interview some Iranian journalists and football people a few months ago, which I'm not sure if after they qualified or before, about potentially not being allowed to go, and they said it was terrible. But now, I mean, and also there was talk that they may not even go to the World Cup draw because lots of officials didn't get visas. But in the end, I think the head coach did go. But at the moment, they've got bigger issues, and there's protests and all kinds of things going on in Iran. Many things we don't know about. There always seems to be politics around the Iranian team anyway, but it was quite significant in 2022, and now it's a different level again. And it's always had an impact on the national team, even when things have been quite quiet, because with things like sanctions and how geopolitics, preparing for World Cup in Iran is very difficult because most teams don't want to come and play in Tehran. It's not worth the hassle. They don't have the money to go on expensive training camps, like say Korea and Japan do. So even that kind of makes it difficult from the get-go. And now you've got the protests, and you've got the most high-profile player, Mehdi Taremi, who played for Inter and now is playing in Greece. One of Asia's biggest stars. Again, was living in Tottenham, I think, not that long ago. But he's been speaking out, sort of about in support of the protest and against the regime. So who knows what's going to happen when the actual games start? Because two of the games will be in LA as well. Which is a big, California's a big Iranian population. So there's so many question marks about Iran. If everything was okay, you think Iran are a pretty decent Asian team and are capable of getting out of the group for the first time. They've been close in the past and never got out of the group. This time, you think it's quite an even group. Be quite confident, but with the way things are, who knows? Just don't know.
Well, they've got a great start, haven't they? I mean, because I'm sure they'll be looking at New Zealand thinking we're going to start with 3 points.
Yes. And you think that would be quite a physical game, and Iran can mix it physically as well. I mean, the big, strong team. Yeah, I think, again, if you get winning that first game, no reason to be scared of Belgium, and then I think they have a decent chance.
Iran-Egypt is 0-0 draw written all over it, isn't it? That one.
Could well be.
They get the 4 points, they're through.
Yeah, exactly. I think for definitely for Korea and Japan, it's a bit different now because there's an extra round. But usually, get out of the group round of 16, that's okay. But that's changed slightly, as I said, for Japan. But I think for Iran, just getting out of the group would be it would be enough and anything more than that bonus, because as I said, they've been close a few times but never quite made the step. And but a lot depends on preparation and what off-field stuff. We just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and just for the benefit of any viewers and listeners who have joined us, I should clarify with regards to Tim's last comments, this is the World Cup finals, not the Eurovision Song Contest finals. You don't scratch my back and I'll scratch yours, or whatever it might be. Although you never know. Who knows?
That's not what I was alleging. I wasn't alleging any collusion at all between. No, none at all. I was just thinking of the style of play. These are Iran and Egypt on the highest level, have a tendency both to be extremely cautious.
And recently coached by Carlos Queiroz as well. Yeah. Both teams have just been coached by Carlos Queiroz, and I think his legacy remains. Okay.
Well, I'm glad that you haven't alleged anything that everybody else might have been thinking. And certainly I've got that on my mind at the moment. I can't erase it once it's got there.
Well, but, I might have to sue you for merely suspecting that I was making such an allegation.
I've got nothing. I mean, you can take my jacket, it's worth a couple of quid, but otherwise I've got nothing for you to sue, mate.
Next time I go to a Swaddy Waddy convention, I'll take it down. Don't worry.
Tim, if you knew how much that comparison hurts, you wouldn't go there. Anyway, in case you're wondering, this is a Brazilian Shirt Name podcast. We do it every Wednesdays and Thursdays at 4 p.m. We're talking World Cup business for obvious reasons. Johnny Duerdan is our Asia football expert, talking us through all the teams that have got through from his part of the world. And we'll talk a bit of politics and culture as well. I think culture's a missing ingredient in what we've talked about so far, the way that the various countries play. Every country's got their style. I think Tim makes a point about Iran, Egypt. When we saw Egypt at the Africa Cup of Nations, they were like, especially against Nigeria, let's just defend as much as we can and pray to God or Allah that we're going to get that break, that one moment when we can turn things around. And of course, they left it a little bit too late. We know how they play. We know how they set up. And in a way, it kind of makes sense that all of these players, many of these players that play for Al Hatli, if I pronounced it correctly, for example, and they play in a certain landscape, which might suit, the World Cup in America might suit them because they're used to playing in dry, hot, humid weather indeed. I wonder if that goes to explain why they're somewhat languid on the pitch. Or is that fair estimation? Languid maybe is not the right way to describe it.
I don't. Like Egypt?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't make myself clear, did I, Johnny? I was just wondering, they do seem to take their time a little bit. And from what I saw from the Africa Cup of Nations, in any case, they deliberate a little bit too long on the ball.
Yeah, not the most dynamic team in the past, when I have seen
That's a better way of describing it. I was being polite, obviously.
Yeah, I think Iran, Egypt may not be a thriller, but who knows? I mean, if there's something riding on it. I mean, I was at the stadium when Saudi Arabia played Egypt in 2018 World Cup, and that wasn't a thrilling game either. Saudis won 1-0, I think.
But as you said, if there's something riding on it, then you could see something, because this is the thing that often frustrates.
Yeah.
Yes, this is the thing that often frustrates me about maybe North African and stretching up to Iran as well. There's talent there, but and one of our friends from that part of the region, Mahir, says that it's the fear of losing. It's the burden of losing forces them cautious. And I remember, sorry to take this to North Africa, but Morocco in '86, where in the first two games, including a 0-0 draw against England, where Ray Wilkins got sent off, they're against 10 men. They didn't cross the halfway line in the first two games. And then the third game was against Portugal. They had to win. And boy, did they go out to win. They smashed Portugal. It was a brilliant performance. So they qualified. And then the next game was against West Germany, and they didn't cross the halfway line again. So this is always infuriating me again. They can do it if they want to, but they need to be put in a situation where it's absolutely necessary. And maybe we will be lucky, and one of these sides will need to win, and we'll get a game.
Yes.
I look forward to that. Well, nice succinct answer. Yes, but one more for you. Uzbekistan. Who are they?
They're certainly not my they're not my Bekistan, but maybe they're Johnny's.
Well, yes, Uzbekistan. I mean, for so long they were known as Asia's chokers because they got close a few times, but they had a World Cup qualification within their grasp, but they couldn't quite take the final step when the pressure was on. But this time they've done it, and yes, and they've had some. The U teams were doing quite well there for a few years, and now you've seen it with the senior side, and of course, being part of the Soviet Union for a long time. There is a certain more of a European style of play, and a lot of the players would go to play in Russia, but of course that's changed a little bit now. And now they're looking for the first World Cup. Slightly interesting is that they had a coach who was a local coach who actually achieved qualification, Timur Kapadze, but he's been kind of pushed aside, and Fabio Cannavaro is the head coach now going into the World Cup, which I think is slightly. I was a bit disappointed, partly because I thought Kapadze, who's done really well with different teams in Uzbekistan at club and national level, different ages, I think he deserves a chance. And also, Cannavaro's record isn't that fantastic. He was in China for a few years, but it wasn't that impressive. But obviously, there is a kind of an Asian kind of liking for big name foreign coaches that I think it's hard to shake. But again, they got quite a tough group. I mean, quite difficult compared to some of them. And the first game is, I think, against Colombia. I'm scrolling down now just to check.
Yes. Colombia and Mexico City, followed by two games with air conditioning, which does make a difference. First Portugal, and then either Dr. Congo, or Jamaica, or the other side. I can't remember.
So that's a really kind of global introduction to, for a team that doesn't get a chance much to play against non-Asian opposition. It's going to be a fantastic experience. But you've got Man City, got an Uzbek defender, Kasanov, who's starting to become quite, I think after indifferent starts to his time in the Premier League.
Yes, indifferent, almost tragic.
It's a good word. It's a good word, isn't it?
But yeah, I mean,
he's looking good. He is looking good, and they knew that. They knew he'd come good as well.
And I think they need that kind of, times when I think they need those kind of players so they can look to. So he plays in the Premier League for a very good team. So when he gets the big World Cup games, I think that helps the others as well. And there's talent in the team. But again, it's the first one, so I think there's no pressure on them. There's not massive expectations, just excitement to see how they can do.
How will they play Kuzanov? I think it's a good point to bring up, and I'd forgotten these from Uzbekistan. How will they play him? Because he's ostensibly a defender, right back, I think it is, for Manchester City. But recently he's been popping up in the penalty area, scoring 1 or 2 goals with his head as well.
Well, I think it'll be in defence. I mean, that's got to be, especially against teams like Portugal, is not going to go wandering off, up front. It'd be interesting to see, I think, how they do line up against, a big, Colombia would be from maybe, obviously Tim knows a lot more, but, a team with a good reputation in Asia is, a very tricky side to play against. And then the Portuguese side, these kind of tests that you want. But a draw from those first two games will be seen as very, very good results. And then who knows?
Question from
Even
Chris.
I do fear. Go on.
No. You do fear. You carry on, Tim. There's a bit of a delay on the line.
Yeah, that there's going to be quite a lot of cautious football, both because of the heat and because you can scrape through Jack Charlton style without doing very much. So I think some of these games are not going to be an easy watch.
Leave St. Jack alone, for goodness sake. May he rest in peace. But Chris has sent us a message, and he says, sorry to pull it back to Japan. What impact did Japan's Women's World Cup finals win have on Japan's men's team? Pressure.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it all adds to the kind of winning culture, and it's confidence as well, isn't it? Confidence that Japanese players, amongst the best in the world, and if the women can do it, why can't the men?
Easier said than done. England have got the same question mark, of course. If the women can do it, why can't the men? I imagine it won't just be England and Japan that are having to do with that. Okay, there's one more. Iraq versus Bolivia in the playoff.
We've got a couple more. I mean, we've got Jordan as well. Jordan also in the first World Cup ever. And they play Argentina. I was in Jordan when they qualified for the World Cup last June, and it was great. When they did qualify, there's massive parties in Amman, and there's all the billboards around the city and flags and banners with the face of the three best players, most famous players on them. And two of them are injured now, unfortunately. One of them definitely will miss a World Cup, I think. It's got an ACL. One of them might do. So the one that's left is, Altamari, who plays for Rennes in France. And he's the kind of big star now on his own a little bit. So I think that's a bit concerning. But Jordan will be a defensive team, counter-attack, club side mentality, and they will defend, I think, and hope to get some on the break.
You see, this is partly why I say you can't keep the politics, let alone the culture, away from the World Cup, because in all the turmoil of the Middle East, people have, forgotten Jordan, which, of course, feels every bit of certainly a conflict when it comes to Gaza or the Palestinians in general, because half of Jordan is Palestinian because of, the last 60 or 70 or 80 years of conflict. But I imagine that just getting into the World Cup, when you describe being in Amman, just getting into the World Cup has lifted the country in a way that, maybe the politicians couldn't do, and united very much the country.
Yeah, and also at the same time, Palestine were playing their World Cup qualifiers in a different part of Amman, and they got close to the World Cup playoffs. So dodged a last-minute penalty and put pay to that. But yeah, I mean, people were so happy. And just a few days after they qualified, the UEFA Nations League final was on. I watched that in Amman on TV. It was at Spain and Portugal. People were so excited that we'll be playing against these teams next summer. And yes, there's a huge love for European football in Jordan. And yeah, they will be just play against Argentina. I think will be a fantastic thing for them. And it'd be good to be in Amman again to be in the cafes or watch that game. But yeah, I think it's not going to be much expansive football played by Jordan really.
Is Jordan against Algeria one of the least attractive games of the whole?
The
whole group.
But it'll be one of the games that you can actually buy tickets to. So don't knock it. You get a chance to buy tickets at a reasonable price, I imagine, as well. Yeah, Jordan versus Algeria. Well, that's going to be an away win for Algeria, then, isn't it? It's not going to be Jordan, as much as River Jordan features on so many reggae songs. Let's not go there. What's it like, by the way? What's Amman like?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, it's quite different because you get the West Amman, and the east side is where a lot of the Palestinian side, and it has a very different feel to the west side, which is all kind of wide boulevards and hotels. But it's a lovely place. People are very friendly, and the food's great, and there's Roman amphitheatres, and yeah, I love football. And the Palestinian refugees side, and that also features football as well, because the two most successful club teams, one is from the Palestine, based on the refugee camps, and one's from the other side of town, and that drives the local scene too. But yeah, it's a country that loves football, and yes, it's just delighted to be at the World Cup, and I hope they can get there without anything, all get visas and things, and those that want to go can go, because there's a lot of excitement.
Should we address the elephant in the room?
Yes.
Good, because it's a huge elephant.
Are you talking about this? You mean my Blackburn Rovers Russian doll? Is that what we're talking about?
I was going to talk about that, but then I thought I've got
the elephant in the room.
Yeah, I've got something equally interesting. But thank you for bringing that in. No, we're talking about a huge elephant, much, much bigger than the African elephant. For goodness sake, those Asian elephants, they're massive, aren't they? And that huge elephant is a place called India that never makes it into the World Cup. I mean, at what point do we say, oh, we've got a World Cup, and India, with a quarter of the world's population, is actually taking part? Because it doesn't feel like it's a real World Cup if India can't even get their noses in.
Right, you think maybe FIFA will keep expanding the World Cup until India and China finally qualify for it, perhaps. And I'm not sure how big it will actually get by that point, but yeah, they haven't. I mean, there's lots of problems in football at the moment. The league hasn't even taken place this season. Chinese, I'll talk about Stephen. Chinese season starts next month, and half the teams are minus points being deducted. So, yes, I think it's quite a while before those two teams India and China will get close to a World Cup. But who knows? But India's, we could do a separate podcast on that, I'm sure.
Oh, no, Tim, I was saying earlier when we missed you for a moment ago or two, I was saying to Johnny, what the Asian federations need is a Pele, because, they need someone to say that, India will win the World Cup before 2050. They need that, don't they? They need, or China will win the World Cup by 2030. They need that. If only they had a Pele to come and say that. I mean, look what a difference it's made.
They've also got to throw us Indeed, yeah, but they've got to throw us a bone somewhere, haven't they? I mean, we have to see some progress, which we did expect from China. When China qualified for 2002, you thought that might be a launch pad, and all the money that they've spent, and it hasn't been for many reasons that John has so eloquently explained over the years. India don't seem to be able to force themselves even into the conversation yet. Yeah,
I think it's a long way away. Just becoming a national game in into these pockets where I think it's quite popular and progress has been made. But of course, the size of the country makes it hard to organise. But I think at the top levels, the management hasn't been forthcoming, and we haven't got a league season. It should have started in September. It actually starts this week. It's a truncated season that it's not good for anybody. Clubs losing money. But in China, the one good thing about China is last month I said Japan won the Asia under 23 championship, but they beat China in the final. China got to the final, first time they got out of the group stage ever before. Again, very defensive team, but there's some bit of good news from Chinese football. At the under 23 level, going all the way. But that's it. Really, it's not much else apart from that.
That's it from us as well. Thank you very much, Johnny. You've been amazing, Johnny Duerdan. How can people get hold of you?
My phone number is
no. 999
1254.
Yeah, that's the easiest way to get hold of me as well. Just 999.
That's my mum's number. She wasn't very happy. But yes, I'm on Twitter at Johnny Duerdan. I think is probably the best. Yes.
And when are you going to have a book out on Asian football, man? So that we can.
I don't know. I mean, if you talk to BBC, and then maybe they can send money my way. And
do they still owe you money?
No. I mean, if they could finance BBC or somebody like that.
Yeah, I'll tell them on your behalf. Yeah. Otherwise, you can follow in Tim's footsteps. He's got one coming out finally on South America. It's taking an age. I must say.
Yeah, but that's a history of the World Cup from a South American point of view. If Johnny were to do a history of the World Cup from an Asian point of view, it wouldn't be a very long book, would it?
I knew you were going to say that. Yes.
Well, I would say no. I would say actually it would be very interesting, because by the time he's gone through all the countries that he has to cover, then he can end the book by saying, and of course, Pele predicted, and leave it at that. But Johnny, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And don't forget the Brazilian Shirt Day podcast. We're back tomorrow between 4:00 and 5:00. And of course, it will be the Global Soccer Interactive, so you can join in the conversation as well. Till then, take care.
Get in touch with the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast on Twitter at BrazilShirtPod, or you can email us BrazilianShirtNamePod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and tell a friend. The Brazilian Shirt Name podcast is an 1129 production.